Well, let's stick with Kathy for a little bit because I finished reading your book and I found myself hoping your next project would be a biography of her.
That would be fun.
I didn't know much about Kathy to begin with.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil too much, but I can't. She had a written correspondence with C.S. Lewis as a 12-year-old because she just wanted to encourage what she thought was an old washed-up author. She had no idea how big he was. And so as a 12-year-old, she was consuming C.S. Lewis, writing C.S. Lewis. You talk about a lot of other things about her, and because she is the greatest influence in her husband's life. So did you know much of her story before starting this project? And if not, what did you learn along the way?
I did. So Kathy and I have worked together for almost as long as Tim and I have. She's spoken at a number of Gospel Coalition events, especially our women's conferences. She's written book reviews for us. She's written essays for us on raising children in the city. She's written one of the most important articles in TGC's history about why you should not marry an unbeliever. And Kathy is one of the most capable writers. I mean, she's a professional editor, not only on Tim's works and a co-author with him on some of his books, but then also previously worked as a book editor in Philadelphia. So that's a lot of Kathy's background. She was a student, got an MA, while Tim got an MDiv at Gordon Conwell. And she is. I think the best perspective I got from her about her was from Liz Kaufman. Dick Kaufman was the executive pastor at Redeemer in the 1990s and was really the person that was supposed to, like Dick and Liz were supposed to plant that church in New York City and were providentially hindered from doing so. Didn't feel a release to be able to do it. It was a surprise situation there. But and Dick unfortunately now has dementia, so I couldn't talk with him, but I was able to talk with Liz. And Liz said that people don't understand that Tim has had an editor inside his head this entire time. And that's Kathy. And that's not just his books, of course, that's also his sermons. And Kathy has never been shy to point out when she thinks that Tim has fallen short on something or missed something. And then we talk about the old, one of R.C. Sproul's favorite things to do at Ligonier Valley Study Center were the Gab Fests, all hours of night talks. And Tim and Kathy would do that as well, especially when they moved to Hopewell, Virginia. And Kathy would participate in those, answering questions. And one of the parts that stood out to me, Jim, was the comment from John Guest, who amazingly is still with us as a longtime Episcopal priest and a revivalist and evangelist, and John Guest says that Kathy Christie, now Keller, is the greatest youth organizer in Western Pennsylvania, and but I think when you put it all together and say what kind of woman is corresponding, one of the last people to correspond with C.S. Lewis, who travels to the kilns the year after he dies, as a teenager, as a young teenager, and then goes on to be this force of nature as a youth organizer for churches, for ministries there, and then goes on to Gordon Conwell. I think I wouldn't be surprised, Jim, if the primary takeaway of the book about Tim Keller is for people to really see and understand the unique influence of Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, she was really the one, if I remember correctly, when they were deciding whether to plant Redeemer in New York, she was the one that said, well, we need to do it. And she had I can't remember exactly how she said it.
Well, it was one of my favorite parts of the book, and there are many things I just didn't know. I mean, you asked Jim earlier about just how I've known Tim. I mean, I've worked closely with them for a long time, and there were most of the things I think in this book I didn't know before I started working on it. And so, Kathy, the main reason Tim had said, at least publicly, that he wasn't interested in the church is that he was worried about Kathy and the boys. And she just didn't want to leave. She just didn't want to She just didn't want to be in New York and have to raise those boys. Her thought was, what am I supposed to do? Tell them to go play in the street? Like, I don't have any options here. And Tim comes back at one point and he says, well, I think Kathy, we just can't go. And I think it's because, I can't do that to you. And classic Kathy. Classic Kathy gets mad at him and demands that he step up as the leader. So
that's right.
Like, I'm gonna deal. She's like, "Don't you make the decision, and I will deal with the Lord. You make the decision. You're the husband. You're the leader. You make the decision. I'll deal with the Lord." And she did at Jack Miller's church in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. And she was released, and she was prepared to go. But it's definitely one of my favorite parts of the book. That's just a good example of their dynamic. That Kathy is that Tim is very concerned for her, trying to take care of her. That she pushes back and says, be a man, take the lead, make the decision. I'll take it up with the Lord.